In today's gospel, we have the only parable that's unique to the Gospel of Mark. Most parables, are in both all the synoptic gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Some are particular to a particular gospel writer. So, example, the prodigal son in the Gospel of Luke, or the wise and the foolish virgins in the Gospel of Matthew. But this is from the Gospel of Mark, that the person who is the farmer, he doesn't know about, especially back then, about cell biology and how a cell grows and everything like that. But what he knows from experience is when it's best to start to put the seed into the ground, where is the best place for the seeds to grow, so he knows what soil is going to be acceptable and grow with great abundance, what soil better just leave feral, when to harvest the particular crop. He knows all of that. He knows that wind and rain and the sun are important for the growth of the plant. But other than that, he really doesn't know. But he knows by experience. The same too with the Word of God. We think about the Word of God and we think about Jesus going into his ministry in the Galilee, that he came with great fanfare into Jerusalem, and certainly the apostles were enthralled with this. Certainly, James and John come up and say, hey, when you come into your kingdom, we want to have the good places. We want to be as your right and your left. But instead, what happened is that initial burst of enthusiasm became disillusionment, and the people began to go with the religious leaders who were always opposed with them. So there was always, even in the Galilee, there were certain people who were opposed to him, certain people who were indifferent, and certain people who accepted his teaching. So we see that in Jerusalem, that the number of people had gone over from the side of initial burst of enthusiasm to not accepting his teaching. And so Jesus was crucified and all seemed lost. Everything seemed apparently lost. There was really nothing much to be done. There was crying, there was sadness, there was sorrow. But all of a sudden on Easter Sunday, they have that hope because the tomb is empty. And the women say that they've seen a vision of the Lord. And so the apostles are in wonderment, kind of a mixture of expectation, hope, and sadness. And then he appears to them. And then they're kind of in that waiting period between the resurrection, the ascension. They're wondering what to do. Well, Peter says, well, let's just go back to fishing. But instead, he gives them the mission that they're going to be fishers of human beings. And so they're in the upper room, they are in waiting, and then finally at Pentecost is the time, and they proclaim the gospel message. The people are in a way prepared for the gospel message because they've certainly have experienced the fact that the tomb is empty, that that they can't say, well, you're talking about this risen Jesus, but here's his tomb, and here's everything as as it was done on Good Friday. Everything is just there. But no, the tomb was empty, so they were prepared, and so many thousands were added that day, and then consistently growing from there. And then it talks about the mustard seed, which is the smallest of seeds, but yet becomes a bush. And the bush is large enough to accommodate the birds of the air to nest in its branches. And so just like the mustard seed, the church began to grow and began to spread and began to go into each of the places, beginning with Jerusalem and then, making a little bit of headway into Samaria, and then maybe people taking back the teaching as they came into Jerusalem for the festivals, coming back to their home country. But the apostles then, beginning after the persecution, local persecutions, going out into other places. And then by the time of the martyrdom of St. Peter and Paul, it's now in 3 different continents. It's in Europe, it's in Africa, and in Asia. So 3 continents from this small growth of 11 faithful apostles and many different but maybe 100 or less of the disciples there in that upper room. From there going off to 3 continents. And so Jesus says that it says that with many parables he spoke to them as they were able to understand. Without parables he did not speak to them, but to his own disciples he explained everything in private. And so one of the things about it also is that importance of parables, because certainly you could talk about God's forgiveness, but it's better to have that example. The prodigal son is that beautiful story, that example that still is on our minds today. We could talk about the need for preparation, but the wise and the faithful virgins is that idea of preparation that, again, is still there today. So what a parable does is that it's a story that helps to make a point. And so it has kind of a surface level kind of a point, and then kind of a deeper level. As you go deeper into it, you can find more depth into it. So the parables, as people were able to enter into it, but they were able to get more out of it. And so what it does is that in a way it forces people to think about the story, to kind of think about it and to see what does it mean, not just on the surface level, but to go deeper into it. And as they were able to do so, they were able to understand more and more of what Jesus was telling them. But again, they had to be willing to do that. If not, they would just say, well, what's he talking about? He's talking about this farmer who's just throwing seed everywhere. What does that mean? What's the guy, just an idiot throwing just seed everywhere? But again, if they're willing to go into it more deeply, they were able to understand what the significance of the story. Thanks. God bless.